Let me know if you've heard this joke before. So there's a Nazi, a trans person, and a furry. They're all Hoi4 players. Ever since Hearts of Iron 4 has released, and even far before then, people have had this idea that video games and the factions and roles you play as them influence the real-world political thinking of the player base. But the newest target of attack is Hearts of Iron 4. Well, again, it's not really new. This attack has been leveled at the game basically since launch, but it seems to be resurfacing again. I wanted to talk about the reported phenomenon and why I think it's just plainly wrong. The thesis basically goes that Paradox Games in general, but really starting with Crusader Kings 2, has pushed Gen Z towards right-wing extremism and fascism due to portraying certain political elements and actions as good in their video game. That's the basic gist of the argument. I will talk a bit more about it later in the video. Some people also make the distinction that the modding scene really encourages or accelerates the indoctrination, since fan-made creations don't have to be as politically neutral or polished as a Paradox release title. Now, as I mentioned, I just find the idea on its face wrong, but I do think it is a somewhat interesting thought experiment on how games, especially ones that tackle war and politics, affect how people view politics and ideologies, especially ones that people have almost no actual real-world association with. So ideologies like monarchism or communism, where in the real world, there aren't many examples of those government types. Like if I say democracy, you probably think of, I don't know, maybe Greece if you're an old head, or maybe you think America, France, Germany, most of the developed Western world is democracy. You most likely live in one. But if I say communist, what do you think? China? Cuba? Again, those countries sort of have a communist facade about them, but they aren't really run on a communist or socialist governance model. Or even monarchism. I say that, what do you think of England? That's not an absolute monarchy. The monarchy has almost no bearing on people's lives. Saudi Arabia? A lot of these ideologies that you encounter in Hearts of Iron 4 and these other Paradox games essentially don't really exist anymore. Again, feel free to argue about what I'm saying, especially the fact that Cuba and China aren't communist again. I'm open to being wrong on that. If you really believe they are, let me know. But for many younger players or people first dipping their toes into grand strategy or Paradox games, it might be their first time actively engaging with these ideologies and sort of getting a look at what their thought process is behind running a nation. And it can shape their understanding of what the ideology believes in or what it leads to. But I don't think it necessarily encourages many people to actually find or join extremist ideologies like communism, fascism, or any other distinct brand of political schizophrenia. So first, I want to steelman the argument, which is the opposite of strawmanning, which means I'm going to present the argument in the most good faith way possible. Their core claim is that Paradox games, especially Hearts of Iron 4, but really the entire catalog, consistently portray the state and centralized power as an overwhelmingly positive force, and that this subtly conditions players to see authoritarianism as efficient, necessary, and desirable. In most Paradox games, you don't play as a person, you play as the state itself, or the spirit of the nation, as the developers like to say. And the more power that state has, the better the game tends to go, because you, the player, are the state. Like King Lu would say, I am the state. That's what you are when you play these games. Almost every game rewards authoritarian as efficiency. In Crusader Kings, centralizing your realm, weakening vassals, and consolidating authority behind yourself almost always produces stronger and more stable outcomes. Fragmentation is bad, decentralization is bad, direct rule is good. Power concentrated in fewer hands, your hand specifically, is almost always rewarded mechanically. In Victoria 3, this becomes a bit more explicit, because once you understand the game systems and how the economy functions, command economies and highly interventionist governments are often the most efficient models in-game, because you, the player, are vastly more competent and intelligent than the AI. Giving the state direct power over industry, labor, and resources allows you to outperform any other alternative. The game doesn't attempt to really meaningfully simulate bureaucratic incompetence. It assumes the state, meaning you, knows best, and it's almost always right. So it is somewhat plain to see that Paradox games in general do reward you for enlarging the government and giving it more direct control over the lives of fake citizens and fake economies. Another argument that they often bring up is that in Hearts of Iron 4, specifically fascism and communism in-game are the best ideologies to play as because they allow you to conquer more territory, expand faster, and actually engage in the game mechanics quicker. Democracies, on the other hand, are slower, more constrained, and less flexible. From a purely mechanical standpoint, the game appears to reward these extremist ideologies by making them more fun and more powerful to play as. Another argument regarding the modding community specifically is that most popular mods for Hoi4, and to a lesser extent other Paradox titles, are all about alternate history universes where terrible ideologies have won or are currently rising up. I know TNO, otherwise known as the New Order. It's an alternate history universe where the Nazis won World War II, finished the final solution, and the free world is on the back foot. Much of the world is in anarchy or under fascist rule or going through terrible times. And when playing that mod, many people tend to play as Nazi Germany, where you're doing terrible things like continuing to use slave labor or repressing people the government considers subhuman. Another mod that people point out, and is somewhat recent, is TFR, or The Fire Rises, an alternate history mod where COVID-19 virus was much deadlier, and in 2019 it kills the Saudi king, which causes a civil war, which eventually snowballs into global chaos, where the US has a civil war, and Nazis and fascists and a myriad of other extremist groups can win and rise up across the world. Russia can sweep across Europe and commit atrocities, and people love playing as the evil factions and people in the game. In TFR, you can play as the Atomwaffen Division, which is a real-world, white supremacist accelerationist group who wants to exterminate all non-white people, and when you win as them in-game, you literally nuke the planet and kill billions of people. Argument is stating that having people repeatedly engage with these systems and terrible ideologies, especially for younger, impressionable players in an already more polarized political environment, risks normalizing, trivializing, or even implicitly endorsing these extremist worldviews that you play as or see in-game, or that the very least push you in a more authoritarian direction. But I think the argument is fundamentally misunderstanding the whole point. These are video games meant to be played for fun. I know it sounds simple, and I imagine that most people who think that video games radicalize people think they understand this point, but playing a role in a game does not mean you endorse the actions you take or ideology you play as. Strategy games incentivize optimization, not morality. Some games do attempt to have you grapple with this a bit more, like Suzerain, where you play as the president in a Cold War, and you have to sort of grapple with making the right choice versus making the moral one, what's best for your nation, what's best for you. But Paradox games are all about painting a map. You've seen the memes. Us Paradox players look at maps all day, whether of the medieval world or 1940s Europe. You look at a map and you paint it with different colors in the most optimal way. Most players routinely pick options they disagree with in real life. Again, this all sort of goes back to the joke I said at the beginning. Nazis, trans people, and furries all play Hoi4. I imagine they have all probably played Germany before and taken actions they don't agree with because it's a game about conquering stuff. Everyone who plays Hoi4, from democratic socialist to anarcho-capitalist, has probably done a world conquest as Hitler, or has done a monarchist playthrough, even if they completely oppose those ideologies. In Stellaris, everyone has played a genocidal empire that has at least once blown up planets. I'm sure everybody watching this video who's done that in Stellaris is probably anti-genocide. People play the New Order as Germany and hate Nazis, but they play it because it's an interesting experience to see how the Nazis view themselves and how the Nazi ideology wouldn't last. If playing a system or faction meant that you believed in it, every Stellaris player would probably be a space Nazi. I want to more directly address the fact that people think Hoi4 mods contribute to rising extremism. I find this to be one of the worst arguments of the bunch. So first off, mods typically reflect player and modder interest, not modder's ideology. Very rarely do popular mods directly just promote an ideology as all good. Now, the New Order gets a lot of shit for portraying a world where the Nazis won and having them be playable. But quite honestly, if you played the mod, it is more accurately telling an anti-fascist story. After winning World War II, the Nazi regime is on its last legs. It has a faltering economy, an overbloated, overextended military. Nothing is going according to Hitler's grand plan. But all because you can play as Nazis in the game. People call it pro-Nazi propaganda. The much more recent criticism has been leveled at the Fire Rises, and that's because it's a modern day mod showing real political extremist groups in a somewhat positive light. But again, not really. When you play as an extremist path, you see the world and get events from their point of view. When you play as the National Socialist Movement in Michigan, they think it's awesome to just kill people who are of a different color than them and commit war crimes. So they think it's positive. When you read their events, they see it in a positive light. The developers don't. It is simply just a case of everyone seeing themselves as the hero. If you're a normal, well-adjusted person, when you play as them, you understand you are playing as the bad guy. They themselves don't see it that way. And I also found it strange that people who have this complaint typically only ever complain of showing right-wing extremism in a positive light, when some of the left-wing extremist paths are just as equally crazy or bad in the Fire Rises. They just don't do race-based massacres, now it's class-based. Having these crazy, wacky ideology and groups in the game just makes it play better. It adds a lot more nations and factions to play as and fight with. They're interesting and they add more tension into the setting. And the Fire Rises and the New Order specifically talk about and show the real grim events that would happen if these ideologies won. I do believe that video games do affect people, especially within the grand strategy genre, but they don't push people into extremism. I think Paradox games encourage historical curiosity and interest in obscure ideologies. Before playing Hoi4, I had never heard of Carlism before, or before the Fire Rises released, I was unfamiliar with the Atomwaffen division. I then went ahead and looked them up and was like, wow, this isn't awesome. But I was just curious because I heard about them in-game. These games and mods having wacky ideologies rarely ever actually attract someone to the ideology. It just sparks interest in more weird niche things. Now, I'm sure with how popular Paradox games are, and so many people have played them, I would imagine some people have been converted to different ideologies based off the game. I mean, the mod for Crusader Kings 3, called After the End, it was also for Crusader Kings 2, takes place in a post-apocalyptic medieval America. That mod helps someone convert to Mormonism. So obviously, introducing people to ideologies can convert them. But if that's really your argument, you probably think we should ban books talking about ideologies you disagree with. If all it takes is you looking up the ideology and then you start to believe it, it was probably going to happen no matter what medium you heard about that ideology in. I ultimately feel like Hearts of Iron 4 and Paradox games at large are radicalizing no one. The community is known to be large and politically diverse. The mods that are purported to increase radicalization are meant to be chaotic. They're not ideologically driven by any means. Blaming Paradox games honestly misses the real causes of extremism that are happening in the world. Worse economic prospects, breakdown of the family unit, a general pessimism over society, and a political world sinking deeper into partisanship. These and many other factors actually increase radicalization of people. Not fun video games where you paint maps. If Hearts of Iron turned people into fascists, the Hoi4 subreddit and any other place discussing it would look very different than it actually does. In Hearts of Iron 4, if you come out as an actual Nazi, you get banned immediately. The community has no patience for those types of people, and if they do, they go off to their own little forums and talk about whatever weird Nazi stuff they do. So again, that has been my case for why I believe that Hearts of Iron 4 and Paradox games in general are not turning anyone into extremists. Again, if you disagree or you think I didn't make a good argument or, I made a bad point, please let me know in the comments. This can be a discussion, of course. But that is all I have. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. And please remember that Jesus loves you.